Ace Arnizzare.
Damn. So I was listening to The Hobbit on Audible. This video is not sponsored by Audible, but if they want to, that'd be kind of cool. Anyway, and when the various dwarves arrive at Bilbo's house, they all take off their hoods and hang them up. A lot of times how this is interpreted in, I think, like the old animated movie and whatnot, is full cloaks and hoods. But if we look at sort of the clothing style of medieval times, Tolkien very much drew inspiration from really early medieval sort of Dark Ages stuff. But even throughout like the High Middle Ages, we find hoods that are actual detached pieces of clothing and are super cool and super useful and I think rather stylish. So I kind of wanted to sort of share mine. I made this last spring, which was poor timing because I never really got a chance to wear it. But there you go. This is commonly called a chaperone, which from what I understand is just kind of a term that means little cape. So again, we can kind of see where that sort of idea comes from. One of the really cool things about sort of the medieval chaperone that shows up in Fiore, for example, both in terms of just the artwork and in actual techniques for self-defense, effectively, is it's got a few ways of being worn and a couple of different stylings. First off, big thing to notice is this huge, huge long tail. Now, even in medieval times, this was seen as being a little bit frivolous, shall we say. It was said that there was an insult that basically translated, I believe from Italian, basically meant one whose the tail of their chaperone hangs down to their ankles. Mine only goes to my knees, so I'm not that much of a fop, or so I like to tell myself. As to the purpose of it, fashion is oftentimes reason enough for things. There is sort of the school of thought that says design of things is never arbitrary, but you know, if you look at fashion and basically style, that is something to be considered. Now, one thing that is kind of useful about it is if I'm wearing the hood like this, I have almost zero peripheral vision, and if I want to like turn my head, I have to turn my entire body, sort of the old superhero turnaround, to try to see what's to the side. But what this can be used for, and we see images of it being used this way, is wrapping it around our head, thusly tying it down, opens up my peripheral vision and means I can actually turn my head and see. This is often how I choose to wear it because it is just a little bit more comfortable. The other nice thing about it is if it's kind of windy, it holds it to my head a little bit better. But the long tail hanging down behind is, I think, cool. To each their own, right? When it's cold and kind of miserable out, this is a really great piece of clothing worn this way. It's super warm. If I need another toque, I can wear another toque underneath. And I think it looks cool. But there's more. What we can do is we can actually wear it a different way entirely. And this is sort of the medieval equivalent of putting your baseball cap on backwards. Or at least that's the sort of the common analogy that people seem to use. I did not come up with that. I've heard it from a number of different sources. So you roll up, this is the face hole, you kind of roll that up to a nice thick thing, and you put it on, stick the top of your head through your face hole. Now you still have this little tail. A lot of times what I like to do is just kind of like tuck it over my shoulder, but it tends to slip down. So what we see in a lot of the old manuscripts is people will actually tuck the tail right into the brim of their hood, and oftentimes we'll put like a fancy bit of bling here. This is sort of the cool and stylish way of doing it. Great for if you're indoors because it's a little bit cooler. You're not surrounded by fabric. This one, incidentally, I've just made from surplus army blankets, so that's 2 layers of wool. So super warm. Worn like this, I can get away with wearing it in indoors or slightly cooler temperatures when people will let me. And again, super, super stylish. Were I to fight in a hood, I would choose this method, or just honestly take it off entirely. I don't like being kind of weighed down by anything. But again, opens up my peripheral vision. It's basically a fancy hat at this point. In fact, around the time where sort of my main interest is, around the sort of early 1400s, this was worn either as a hood or as a cap like this. But later on, when you start to push into the Renaissance, they would actually purpose make sort of the cap version. So it wouldn't be a full hood, but it would have this long kind of like floppy bit on one side and the tail on the other side, and people would only be able to wear it as a cap. So that kind of says, like, first off, the pervasiveness of this garment, and also, like, well, just if no one's wearing it as a hood anymore, why make it that way? A friend of mine is talking about making sort of the cap version. I'm very curious to see how that works out. So yeah, this is the medieval chaperone, or just medieval hood with long tail. Earlier sort of hoods, sort of like Viking Age, Dark Ages sort of deal, didn't have the tail, but other than that, they were pretty similar. It's a super pervasive piece of clothing, super practical for all kinds of weather. This one is mostly waterproof, keeps the rain not only off my head, but off my shoulders as well. Functions as a scarf, as a toque. Let's bring it back, shall we?